And good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. My name is Mark Burson. I'm the Government Division Chairman, and we're here today to to participate in a really great presentation on a new ANSI standard. It's a new beginning point for efficiency and effectiveness in government, and Rich Mallory will be telling us more about that. But first, I want to give you a little bit of a heads up on who we are, what we're doing, and just a little bit of background. So today's webinar is brought to you by the American Society for Quality and the ASQ Government Division. I'll be moderating the session today along with Neota Brown, who's our event technical lead. And you can advance the slide, Rich, to the next section. Thank you. A little bit about ASQ and the Government Division. ASQ, the society, represents the voice of quality throughout the world with over 60,000 members. And the Government Division is one out of 26 divisions within the society. You can find more information on the ASQ website, both about ASQ as well as the division itself. The Government Division is a community of practitioners focused on quality and performance improvement for federal, state, local, and international governments. We are composed of government leaders and employees, seasoned experts, consultants, practitioners, university professors, students, and others engaged with or interested in the public sector. So I encourage you to join our community. The other thing is we are currently increasing the size of our Government Division Leadership Council. And if anyone out there is interested in volunteering, please let us know. Just get in contact with us and let us know, because we'd love to hear from you. We do webinars about once a month. There are more webinars that will be announced soon. You can always go to the ASQ Government Division website to learn more and to register for any upcoming webinar. So we do have one planned for September, but we'll announce it very soon. Rich, thank you. So for today's webinar, if you have any questions, just submit your question. Use the Q&A tab to send in any questions you have during the webinar. We're going to try to address as many questions as we can at the conclusion of this session. There's a lot of contact information for division officers and speakers, I would encourage you to take a look at that. That's on the very last slide at the end of the presentation. There's a lot of contact information, so you can reach us. Most presentations are available for download within a few days of the webinar. So again, go to the Government Division website to learn more about that. I am, Neota, I'm getting some feedback for some reason. I'm not sure. It could be
I was just going to say, everybody please remember to mute yourself.
Thank you. Now, I have the great pleasure of introducing our speaker today, Rich Mallory. But before I let him go off and give his presentation, let me tell you a little bit more about Rich. Rich is a senior member of ASQ and specializes in operational assessment and application of quality science in government. His background includes many years in executive management of government agencies at the federal and state level, and over 20 years experience as a consultant, trainer, and performance coach for all levels of government. Rich was also an examiner several times for the Baldridge Performance Excellence Award Program. He was a past chair of the ASQ Government Division. He was a founder of the Center for Quality Standards in Government and we call that the CQ-SIG at this point. He also was a co-chair for the division's successful effort in publishing the ASQ ANSI G1 standard. And just a personal note is actually Rich, while he was chair of the government division, got me involved in the government division leadership council. And so I appreciate that, and I appreciate Rich, and thank you very much for giving this presentation, Rich. And I'm looking forward, and we all are looking forward to hearing more about what you're doing and what's happening with this ANSI standard. So there you go, Rich. It's all yours.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. And yeah, I would just echo too what Mark said. If any of you are interested in what we're doing, please volunteer, because you never know where it'll lead you, and I'm sure it'll build your career and your knowledge and just your excitement for what you do. And I'm certainly excited to be here with you today, talk about two of my favorite subjects, government and quality, and excellence, building excellence in government. And since you're all government practitioners, I hope you won't mind if I take a minute and just brag a little bit about that, because I think government is the biggest and most important industry in the United States, and in the ASQ, we wouldn't have a country or a community without our government. Our government is the glue that bonds us together. It's everything behind the beautiful flag of our nation is government. And we wouldn't have commerce if we didn't have government. We wouldn't have courts, we wouldn't have currency, we wouldn't have roads, we wouldn't have safety. You know, without a Department of Defense and police, we wouldn't have emergency response, we wouldn't have community and parks, and, you know, nobody would be a billionaire if they couldn't sell software to a lot of prosperous people, and that's government. So, you know, for all of you who are on the phone, I would just say, hey, you know, we're doing something super important for everybody, and I think that's sort of the pride we feel, and we should always feel that. I think in terms of quality, though, quality, many times I say when people who aren't in government talk about us, government, they say, you know, we just don't like paying our taxes. And I always say, well, it's sort of like your country club, you know, you're going to pay your fees, and then you, the board of directors, ought to be deciding what you get back for that, and that's the quality. What you pay is the tax part, and what you get is the quality part, and that's, I think, what maybe gets a lot of you excited to be involved as we are, that through the quality effort, we're getting to match those things. So we're getting people the value they deserve and building our community at the same time. And I've spent a lot of years, I got bitten by the quality bug years ago, and probably was most concerned or maybe disappointed or chagrined by the fact that quality back then and quality now just doesn't build on itself. It makes so much sense to all of us, and yet when we introduce it in any given place, it lives for a little while and then it goes away. And there's no sustainability. So I think what this effort, the ANSI G1 standard, is all about is how do we build sustainability, and what we're basically saying is you can't manage what you can't measure. So literally the 3 stars that you're looking at there, the standard is going to talk about the first 2, and government division and the Center for Government Standards is going to pursue the 3rd one next. So if you're interested, at the end, we'll talk maybe some more about that. But what we're talking about now is a process and system and a maturity model that creates a visible scorecard for those things. So the story that we're going to talk about is the story of process and system maturity models that are the foundation of the standard, and they provide a means of standardizing and making visible the use of quality practice. Can't measure what you can't manage what you can't measure. So we're going to make it obvious to everybody and put a scorecard, a ruler, against every manager and supervisor in government, or we'll have the ability to. I mean, we're not going to, we the quality professionals aren't going to threaten anybody, but we're going to say we have the ability now to do that, and if we're given the permission and the authority, we can create a scorecard to see where everybody's at in the use of quality practice. So in doing that, we're going to have uniform and objective measures that apply to everyone. And so no one can hide. No one can say, you know, that's the boss's deal. We'll have a new boss in another year. I'm going to ignore this stuff. We're going to have a no excuse method of getting everyone on board with quality and prevention, right? Prevention of problems. And the basis of organizational quality scorecards are that they predict efficiency and effectiveness. You know, if we believe in quality, we know if we're using quality practices, they're fundamental and complete, that we have an efficient and effective organization. And I hope I don't talk too much because I know everybody's just got an hour allocated, but I think many of our traditional performance measures of government are imposed on us, number one, but number two, they're often based on high-level agency outputs, and they don't get backwards into the guts of the organization and look for and predict and show where we have opportunities for improvement. So what we're building through the standard is fundamentally new. It's fundamentally different from anything you've ever heard before, because all of a sudden, instead of top-down and high-level, we're talking about bottom-up. We're talking about going into every office and nook and cranny of an organization and saying to every manager and supervisor, show us what you're doing and how many of the quality practices are you using and how well are you using them. If we can do that, we can fundamentally change organizations. So what's our vision? Our big picture vision of the Center for Quality Standards Government Division and the new standard is an expectation that government everywhere will someday perform an annual quality review and report. You know, that we'll know what we pay and we'll know what we get. And in doing that, we will now create a basis for sustainable quality practice in government, because everybody will know what you're doing, what you're not doing, and if there's an expectation, then the imperative for the use of the standard will grow. So, what do we see that, or in terms of how this will come about, is number one, many of the folks listening on the phone will get excited about this stuff, get a copy of the standard, and we'll show you a little bit at the end how to use it and how to apply it. But you'll be self-motivated. You'll apply it in your own government agencies, and you'll say to your peers, hey, look, we've got the highest level of professional recognition, a ASQ certification of our process efficiency. So we'll have a scorecard that we can give you. So that's one way. And then government division will try to provide recognition for all of you who do that. And some organizations as a whole will say, hey, this makes a whole lot of sense. We're going to implement this here. And they'll have an organizational scorecard. And ultimately, and I showed you that third star up front, we're going to get governance involved. We're going to get legislatures and city councils and boards of community districts everywhere to look for this stuff. So they'll basically be saying, hey, are you using the ASQ standard or not? And what are your scores? What are your maturity scores in that standard? And then lastly, maybe we'll have a requirement, just like an annual financial audit, that we do a quality audit. And so we're thinking this is a fundamental ground changer. It can only come about with that expectation that standards be used. And, you know, ASQ is our basic foundation for making this happen. So there's a picture of the cover of the booklet. The standards are available in the ASQ bookstore, and we have some summary materials available on our government division webpage too. But these standards were published in March of this year. They are new professional standards that define efficiency and effectiveness, as it says, guidelines for evaluating the quality of government operations and services. And my presentation, I'm going to cover the system and process maturity models, talk about a little bit about why they can provide a uniform objective measure of quality. And most importantly, and I continue to talk about this, is visual management, make things obvious to everybody. The concepts of structured system management, which are new, but they're also foundational to this standard. Why this applies well to government, maybe just briefly, and maybe I've already covered that. And how all work can be brought into quality framework through its application. And that's the, I think the fundamental ground changer is that by having a process and a system standard, now all of a sudden we can cover all the work of an organization. We can cover program office administration. We can cover program oversight. We can cover quality management systems. We can cover strategic planning. We can cover things that have never been covered through process mapping alone. Excuse me, I'm in Sacramento and we have all the fires going on, so there's a little bit of smoke in the air and it kind of makes my throat a little froggy. But in any case, his history of the standard goes all the way back to Philip Crosby, who wrote Quality is Free. And he came up with a quality maturity grid and sort of started us off on that 5-level measurement of maturity that a lot of you have probably seen in other types of quality frameworks. But a lot of what Philip Crosby had was sort of organizationally related. So it was sort of how much does the management use quality practices and sort of what I call subjective measures, and they were broad. They were applied to a broad piece of an organization, not a single manager. What we're talking about is breaking everything down to the point where it applies to a single manager or a single supervisor. So 1982, I found and have looked at, actually, IBM had developed some quality standards that they applied to their processes. They called it a process certification model. But again, like the Crosby method, it had a lot of contextual descriptive behaviors. In 1991, H. James Harrington, who's actually, I've been proud to say, part of our effort in developing this standard, and he's been a supporter all along. He included a chapter in his business process improvement book where he talked about qualifying processes according to requirements, but then moving backwards and qualifying, he called it certification of process steps with requirements. And that is a fundamental piece of what we're talking about, because as you'll see, we're going to break our maturity models back to even steps of systems, steps of processes. And that way it helps us incrementally analyze what's going on. And another one of my mentors that probably nobody has heard much about is Cherian Varghese, who is in Saudi Arabia. And he published an article that grouped quality methods and practices with the equivalent of the Crosby maturity levels. And that sort of set my mind going. And I said, oh my gosh, he's onto something here. So I grabbed what Cherian had done, and I created the first process models that I was using at the time with clients. And I was super excited about that, because I was saying, hey, for the first time we can show the use of quality practices with this model. So when I joined the government division in 2011, and that's the benefit, I think, of the big organization, is you get a lot of your peers. And I wasn't exactly sure if everybody else would think this was a great idea, but I said, hey, what do you think of this? And everybody said, hey, that sounds like it makes a lot of sense. So they set up a subcommittee on quality standards, and I started getting peer reviews of all the things I'm doing. And even Mark, thank you, Mark, has been a sort of an inspiration, even though he came on about that time. Maybe he read every last thing that we did. He gave me feedback on it, and that's the beauty, I think, of the government division is everybody can help you polish and develop and move ahead. So 2014, I actually published my first book, Quality Standards for Highly Effective Government. It kind of outlines the 3 stars we started out with. And I got to present this thing at the World Quality Conference that year. And since then we've basically also picked up a structured system model, and a lot of my peers helped me there. Chris Shepard, who's at NASA in Huntsville, helped me an awful lot with the system standard. And my peers everywhere, again, gave me lots of feedback. 2018, we said, hey, we've got a good model here. Let's move this ahead, and went through the formal certification process with ASQ and then with ANSI. And this year in March, it was published by ANSI. So we're proud to say, we are officially recognized. The standard has been broadly vetted by many organizations and by as many experts as we could find, and we believe it's going to be an industry changer. So one thing too I wanted to say, I know a lot of the folks on the phone are quality practitioners, and probably you're the leaders in your organization, and I just need to always point out that without a standard, without a measurable, visible feedback of the use of quality practices, we're in what I call spotlight lean environment. And basically, it's only going to proliferate when management is continuously being a cheerleader, and where management is continually rewarding everybody, and where they're always on board and they always have time for you. And as soon as management changes or management gets busy or higher level than them management mandates something else, then all of a sudden it goes away. And actually, Government Division did do a formally structured study of quality leaders in probably 10 different states. This has probably been 5 years ago. Well, we had them estimate the life cycle of quality efforts, and we came up with 3 years, about 2.5 years. So, which, not coincidentally, is about the average lifespan for an executive leader in any government agency. So, in any case, the bottom line here is most relevant. We as quality leaders need a way to make quality practice visible without a leadership spotlight. It's great if we can get one, but you can't always get it. And whenever you're looking at like Baldrige or ISO 9001 or any other quality framework, they're always saying, well, you've got to get the attention of management. You've got to get the attention of management. We can't all get the attention of management. We got to find a different way. So basically, the standard addresses the fundamental good management maxims. You can't manage it if you can't measure it. And you need accountability and authority in the same place. So we can't allow subordinate leaders in an organization to say, well, quality is not my job, or I would do it if. You got to say, wait a minute, we're basically centering our quality focus just on you and just on your outputs and just on your workflow. What are you doing? So the third thing I think that is a management maxim is that legislative bodies do respond to audit results, especially regarding efficiency and effectiveness. So I believe that ultimately when we do show, hey, legislatures, you've got two choices. Government can use a maturity model, or they can not use a maturity model. If they use it, though, you're going to have an excellent professional feedback system on their efficiency and effectiveness. So now let's get into the details of the model themselves. The practices here are on the left, and our workflow is on the right, going top to bottom. So basically, we all know that model on the right, inputs, workflow, outputs, right? And it applies to process, and it applies to system. And basically, we know all of them have supplier suppliers, and that we can define that supply management and input requirements and measure input requirements and apply quality against those things. We all know that. But do we do it? No. Do managers do it? No. Oftentimes they don't. So all of these things are pieces of the known quality practice that we know can improve and time again yield results if they're used. And again, so we just go back to our puzzlement. Why don't they use them? You know, it's like, we can't stand it that people don't use these things. Well, we're going to make it visible, whether they are or not. So standard workflow is one. Customer or process design requirements is one. Streamlining and prevention, just being aware of the cost of quality and waste and all that stuff. Do they have a standard best practice that they measure against and test? Do they have engaged, empowered workers? And that one's a little bit more subjective, not objective, but we still found some ways to put that into the standard that are measurable. Measurement and feedback, visible management. Do they have a scorecard? Risk identification, risk management. Do they do any of that? Identification of waste, and do they run cycles of improvement? Can they show us what the results are? You know, all those of you listening on the phone, you know those things are measurable. And so what we're doing in the standards is we're putting those in a format where you can grade every office in the use of those things. So basically we've got system and process maturity models, and they both follow this, and we recommend in the standard that you follow this kind of a coloration, if you want to call it, visibility. So basically what we're saying is, if we're going to go in and measure the maturity of either a system or a process, that the only bad thing is going to be if they're not using any of those principles. And what principles? Oh, these principles. They're not using any of these. Oh, okay. They ought to be using some of those to some level. And if they are, then they're at the level 1, initiating. So I think we kind of got thinking about the typical government scorecards, and mostly those the colored ones, and they're sort of related typically to our performance feedback system, which oftentimes, as I said at the beginning, is output-based and high level. But in any case, if any of you have used those in the past, you know, everybody wants to be in the green. They hate it when they're in the yellow, and they never want to be in the red, right? So they're always arguing about, and we're always hesitant. Probably nobody's going to get put in the red unless they're going to get fired. but some poor souls will put in the yellow category. But what we're thinking is, you know, honestly, if we could get everybody in government at a level 2 and a 3, we'd be doing rocket science for the public. Typically, the use of quality, the potential use of quality and getting its benefits is at a very low level in government. And the studies we've done show that probably clearly less than a third, but maybe even less than a fifth of all government agencies use any kind of structured quality practice. So we're thinking this kind of a scoring is going to be helpful in terms of generating interest and hopefully making people successful, making managers, supervisors feel more incentivized to achieve than fearful and threatened and wanting to escape and avoid. So here's a real simplified version of the process maturity model, and if you do get the copy of it from ASQ, and they only charge $30 for it, but if you do get the copy of it from ASQ, it'll break these down in much greater detail. But what we're basically saying is there's 3 criteria groups. There's a standard process, measures and feedback, and engagement and improvement. So basically that's a little bit of 2 things. It's sort of saying, you know, are your frontline workers involved and aware? And then also, we can track your use of like a storyboarding method or some other quality method to track and improve and create change in results. So So engagement improvement is about those things. Standard process is about, with process, it's largely a process flow chart or procedure, and then it's integrating that into the jobs and making sure it's referenced and up to date and used with other processes or with larger scale systems or with other divisions, and then looking at risk management and results probably. With your measures, we're talking about moving from, no requirements, which many of you probably have seen going into a process situation initially, to subjective requirements that are, judgment calls and not precisely measured, to objective requirements that we can clearly validate and verify and measure over time. To leading requirements, not just output requirements, to results, and hopefully then the use of statistical process control and control limits. So you can kind of see as you walk through these things, and we spend a lot of time as professionals, and I'm not just speaking of myself, I'm speaking of, we've had at least 30 of us in government division reviewing these things extensively, if not 50, I don't know. But we're basically saying, can you tell the difference between a level 1 and a 2? Can you tell the difference between a level 2 and a 3? And how would you do that? So we tried to define these things real precisely so that they're a uniform, objective tool of verifying maturity of a process. And I'm going to talk a little bit, depending on how much time I have here, I'm going to talk a little bit about system and documented system, what I call structured system management. But it's basically taking a larger scale output that is produced on a cycle, like maybe producing a strategic plan over time. You're going to do one a year for 10 years in an organization. Do you have a structure for that or not? Does everybody reinvent it every time or not? So system ends up being a different animal, but it still has a cycle, and it still can be evaluated. You can do lessons learned at the end of each cycle. So you can have a structure and purpose. You can have measures and feedback. You can have risk identification, risk management, and you can have engagement and improvement. So the same kind of level, maturity level gradation is possible, and so we've provided one. With all of these things, what we're basically saying is the use of, and here's something that I've sort of come to realize as I go through my quality practice over the years, that as important as it is, it's often overlooked that we need in organizations or process analysis or whatever to use the estimation of the cost of quality or unquality or waste as our driving force. And so in our maturity models, as we're looking for the use of quality practices and evidence of use of quality practices, this is going to be a primary one we're going to look at. How good are you at identifying your criteria for pass-fail within process steps or at the end of a process? Throughput time or wait time, delay, throughput yield, first pass correct, or value add versus non-value add. And government that probably applies a lot of over-recognized risk factors as a cost factor. So in any case, we can build those things in, and through the models now, all of a sudden we have the potential for an organizational scorecard. And this is just a model. It's just a sort of a facsimile model that I created based on an organization I had worked with once. But it basically shows, and this was a water sewer district, but it shows how in a water treatment plant, for example, you might have plant operations run as a system, but your daily plant operations as a process. And likewise, throughout the organization, you can break things down into process or systems, and you can focus on the key things, and you can create a scoring, and you can create a scorecard. So now all of a sudden, if you're in that organization and you're one of the ones that are showing up in the yellow category, and we, the quality manager, bring this into the next executive meeting, we're going to have a lot of discussion with finance and billing and human resources about why aren't you developing your quality systems better. So again, we know that structured system management is a new thing, and honestly, I have had the ASQ library do a search for me on everything that they had on system management, and there is nothing else on structured system management. There's a lot of discussion of systems, and I won't go into it now, but what we're going to present to you is truly new and unique, and something that I feel that you ought to look at. Obviously, I have written a book as a guide. I'm not just in it to make money, as you can tell. In fact, I wish I could sell more books and make some money. But in any case, they're provided as a service and as something that hopefully is a good guide to a brand new practice of quality. If you don't buy the book, though, I did publish a fairly lengthy article in the Quality Management Forum, summer 2019. That'll give you the summary of it, and I'm going to do a real quick summary of it here today. What does system management look like? Why are there two different things here? And basically, as some of you may know, our process model is based on something that's high frequency and low variation. So we don't want to see, and we want to build out variation of tasks, methods, and we want to create a singular focus of outputs for a process. So, if we're doing a licensing action, we want one line that's doing bass fishing licenses and one that's doing trapping permits. We basically want to, and hopefully we want to see a high volume and maybe, multiple cycles in any given period of time, and this truly becomes what I call sometimes the fallacy of the assembly line in government. A lot of times we don't have assembly lines. We have a group of somewhat broad generalist occupations doing things that vary greatly. So, things like HR recruitment would be, if we're going to develop who are we going to recruit this year, what job skills we're looking at, where can we go, do we attend a job fair? Oops, it's a COVID year, we need to build in virtual methods. So we know there's two different things going on. If you go to a Starbucks and you say, how do you brew a pot of coffee? They say, oh, it's a process. And they probably have written down, and maybe they even have training materials against it. If you say, how do you manage a store? How do you prepare employees to deal with the different orders of the day? Has a lot more variation of task methods and outputs. So basically what I call the unifying theory of workflow management is that we have sort of three things that we can standardize. One is, the uniformity of the outputs. If we're only doing one specific thing for one specific audience and there's a very specific set of requirements, bingo, it's a process. And vice versa. If we can create a uniform production environment, so back in the pre-COVID days, if we could get everybody in the same physical space and lay it out so that the forms were all in order, and or the public came in here and went out there, or we could create the IT system with all the same screens, same forms. It's uniformity of production environment. It's not so possible in systems, it's highly possible in processes. And uniformity of people, steps, and methods. We hire people with a set of skills that are specific to what we're doing. We train people or test people or build people's careers in a particular direction, enforcement, benefits, whatever, procurement. And we have steps and methods. We have standardized work. So, the three things that we can do are these, and process comes up here, systems and projects come out down here. And they're harder to define, but they're still possible. So I'm going to try to limit myself to about 10 minutes or less and cover both structured systems management and some wrap up here. Needed a means to structure a system. We knew we needed that, and I guess that came maybe from my multiple exposures to the use of the Baldrige quality framework, that they constantly talk about systems, and then you go out to an applicant and they say, what do you mean by a system? What's a system? And so we do know some things about systems, that they produce a specific thing, that we want to have an approach and a deployment. And we want them in the Baldrige framework, we want them to be able to show that they've tested and improved it over a series of years. So, but we know systems activity is not always sequential. So, you might have, say, a one-stop, a lot of states at one point had set up a one-stop permit center for businesses moving to their states, and they put together experts from a bunch of areas in government, and applicants would go to that office and they would get and they would ask these people a series of questions, and they would categorize it and maybe help them find locations, or look for colleges, or help them with taxes or permits or whatever. But it was definitely something that was cyclical, but it wasn't sequential at all. I mean, you might have these experts going back and forth as the applicant modified their request 3 different times. So we knew there was a predictability of what they were doing, but it's not sequential. And the deployment may be continually varying, but the purpose and approach not so much. And like projects, we may need to use what they call in project management progressive elaboration. So, what happens in one step defines what is done in the next step. But we do know that they have milestones and activity groups that they're predictable. So, even in the out-of-state applicant, we can have an initial reception, we can have obtain applicant information and plans, we can have, assign interim responses, we can have communication. So, I mean, there's 4 or 5 things that we can do that are repetitive for all applicants, and we'll call those activity groups. And we do in system mapping. So whenever we're doing a system, we're identifying and naming a system. We're unifying that system by its purpose or aim, as Dr. Deming told us. We're identifying the steps or actions that we call principal activity groups that always occur in that process. Maybe not all in the same order. Sometimes maybe one's just annually and 3 are interconnected. But still, each one has a definable output, and that's how we test an activity group. Something happens at the end of it, and here's what it is. And in defining it, we can set up a measurement. And we can identify an output criteria. And most important, what we do with structured system mapping, and actually this came from one of my other heroes of quality is Kaoru Ishikawa. I don't know if any of you have read this book. It was a 1985 book, but when they were first applying quality in Japan, they were mainly doing system analysis. They weren't doing process mapping. And so they were looking at what's wrong with this manufacturing industry, why can't it get a market, how's it doing at marketing, how's it doing at design, how's it doing at product delivery. And in looking at those things, we're looking at system activity groups, and we can break those into subsystem activity groups, and sometimes we break those into processes. But in any case, we can create measures or indicators, and we can create a map of that. We can do risk management plan, and we can track results in areas of waste and delay. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it, but a system map looks like this. And I use the keystone symbol to represent either an activity group or milestone. You can easily use a system approach for a project, and with equally good effect. And while each project varies, the project management activities do not. So we can set milestones and put outputs against that and measure the success in achieving it. And we can use Karu Ishikawa's primary method, what I call the positive cause and effect. It's not a root cause analysis, it's a what drives success analysis, to say which activities and actions do we have to do to be successful in this group. And here's what we're showing here. As you recall, probably Karu Ishikawa used to talk about creating the perfect cup of tea. So he said, what drives that? And that's what we do. And when we do that and put these causes in, we end up with what we call a best practice operational plan. So all of a sudden, if you take a budget office, for example, and you say that they serve as a counselor and advocate for the programs within the department or division. How do they do that? They do a positive cause and effect, and they say they define the need for reporting by fund and appropriations and programs. They respond to meeting requests. They create annual allotments to programs and managers, and they understand how programs administer fees. We can further break that down, and a way that I suggest in the materials that are provided in the sources is talk about attributes of success and attributes of failure. So we can basically say, if you're failing at appropriations tracking against budget, then, or if you're succeeding, you have current records and reports are accurate within some number of days. So like all of a sudden now you can see, by structuring a system, I've got a way to measure it. And that's what we're literally looking for, is ways to measure both through metrics, hard numbers that show the goodness or failure to meet a requirement, or indicators, which are check sheet items of things that you might do, like quarterly meetings with program managers. We have now an ability to say, are we fulfilling a best practice plan to achieve the system output? So I tried real quick to put together an ISO type of an application. If you have a quality management system, an ISO 9001, you can do the same thing. So if you're trying to, maintain and improve a defined quality practice as defined in an ISO system, you review an update of QMS manuals and policies. I can put that in an indicator. Review and an update of using the ISO 9001 as a framework. I can put that on an indicator. Conducting a schedule of audits, ensure completion of corrective action plans. Again, I can put it on an indicator. So now I can show the maturity of using my own ISO system, because I've taken the time to define what it is I'm trying to do in each activity group, and then I've taken the time to do cause and effect of what drives success in that attribute. So I know I'm getting a little short of time, and I don't want to keep everybody too long. But basically, we have, through a structured system management and frankly through the process maturity modeling, we get everybody to develop what I call a best achievable operational plan. We get every manager to create one, and then we measure them against what they say is important for them to achieve it. And that's why this approach makes so much sense, because then we're going back and using our criteria against the best practice operational plan that we've helped each manager supervisor to create. So just in conclusion, let me say, how to use these guidelines. We would suggest you obtain a copy of the G1 standard, become familiar with it, and feel free to call on Government Division to help out. If you're using it personally, you're going to want to talk to each manager supervisor, gather their documentation, performance measures, and help them identify key processes and systems. We're going to use the Pareto rule and the main things that drive their office success or their process success. We're going to encourage them to self-evaluate, and then maybe you to help them be a second-party evaluator, and then ultimately to seek formal evaluation and registration. Who can evaluate entities? Yes, you can self-evaluate, just buy the standard, apply it, use it. And also, we have now developed a training program for designated examiners. We have a 20-hour training that I teach that we can provide for you or register you in. And we'll be sending out, actually I have the dates in the next slide, I think. And also we have now a list of 17 designated examiners in this new standard. So they can help you with evaluating and providing feedback on your use of the system. So and likewise, we're moving ahead. The Center for Quality Standards is going to serve as a registrar, and organizations that apply will verify your maturity level as an organization. Next class dates, I've set aside September 21 to 24, October 26, 29. It's a 20-hour class. We do it 5 hours a day, 4 days, Tuesday through Friday. So if there's enough registrations, we'll be doing both of those dates. We'll be setting out a notice of the classes soon. So, and we would just say the ASQ ANSI G1 standard benefits is the highest professional recognition that you can obtain in terms of the use of quality practice. It provides verification of efficiency and effectiveness, and it will give you the ability to create an organization-wide scorecard. So we invite you to join with us, and if we have an interest group within ASQ that's advancing the use of the two standards you've heard about. We're also endeavoring at quality and governance, and those who would like to participate should get in touch. So I'm excited, and hopefully you're excited, and hopefully we're all working towards the same thing, which is building a high-quality government that is very productive and beneficial for our country as a whole. So I'll turn it back to you, Mark, if we have any questions.
Well, thank you, Rich. That was a fantastic presentation. I really appreciate that, and I'm sure many of us on the call do as well. Rich, can you go to the last slide? I just want people to have the contact information, the very last slide.
Oh, all right, there we go.
That way people can reach out to you or others in our group. Feel free to jot down email addresses and things like that. Again, we are looking for volunteers to join us in the Government Division Leadership Council. So I mentioned that earlier in the presentation. I'm just bringing it up again. If you want to learn more about the Government Division or just want to join as a member, you're welcome to, or just participate in our webinars. We welcome that at any time. So let me get through a few questions here before we leave for the day. We had several questions, Rich. One is, based on your experience with Baldrige, how do these new standards relate to the 7 criteria
Every time it says process or system, a lot of times it's in operations, the category 6, but it gives you the structured ability to look at the maturity in that area. It fits in, hand in glove.
Okay, fantastic. Another question that came up was, do you have a proposed model scorecard for procurement?
Wow. No, we just have the one scorecard that, you know, you would probably apply a system model for a procurement department, and then you would find within procurement, obviously, there's going to be a couple of specific processes, and so then for those, you'd use the process model. But we would invite every organization to, you know, if you're self-evaluating, adapt it yourself to, I think it'd be pretty easy to sort of tailor the criteria scoring for your own organization if you need to.
Makes total sense. I mean, the way the maturity model is set up, it can be tailored to a variety of functions. Yeah. Fairly easily, fairly readily. So can you discuss the acceptance and resistance to the G1 standard across various levels of government, federal, state, local, etc.?
Yeah, the weird thing, you guys, I'm sure if you've been around quality for very long, you've experienced it, that as soon as you start talking to an organization that isn't necessarily red hot motivated to do quality, that they say, well, this is going to take our time, you know, we're in crisis all the time, we don't have time for this, you're going to make our crisis worse. So that's probably the biggest source of resistance. And, you know, the obvious answer is, well, you know, unless you take a minute to improve things, you're going to be living in crisis for the rest of your life. But, you know, we're always looking for surplus time to try to do it. I think the bar, what we tried to do is create the bar is very low in terms of moving from the pink or red category to the yellow category. You know, we're just saying, just start on the quality journey and you'll qualify at the level 1. So that's how we're trying to address barriers.
Mm-hmm. You know, actually, let me take this one step further on this same topic. As we know, government does have inherent obstacles that are just part of the system of government. How will the fact that the government standards now recognized by ANSI, how will that help, or can it?
Yeah, I think it's a powerful recognition, and that kind of goes back to how we see this being expanding and growing as a professional standard, is that some of you who are listening here today and some who've, you know, been involved in past efforts are already implementing, and they will be recognized for high levels of efficiency and effectiveness. So to be able to go to your governing board or your bosses and say, oh, by the way, we got a maturity certification that under the ANSI standard that is very favorable, that it's going to be, you know, bragging rights, basically. You're going to be, your peers are going to view you in awe. You know, hopefully you'll get promoted to a bigger position in office where you can, again, use the same standard.
I also wanted to mention that this presentation will be available. It's being recorded. Will be available for download if you go to the ASQ Government Division website. Probably in a couple days it'll be available. One other question for you, Rich, at least one, maybe a couple more, is, you know, as we roll this standard out, what are some techniques for introducing the G1 to government organizations, and also just you know, getting organizations spun up? What's the plan for that?
Always you're looking for folks that are interested and have a span of control that they're willing to implement in. And when you do that, then we're starting the recognition of folks. I think as quality professionals, one of the hardest things we do is to, we're not necessarily the center of the world in terms of the organization. And so a lot of times we're just creating reports. So all of a sudden, if you're a quality leader in an organization and you say, okay, I went and talked to our 10 divisions, 2 of them were interested and we did the evaluation, and of those 2, we identified, I don't know, 10 systems and 20 processes, and we certified 18 of them at 1 or 2 level, and so then now all of a sudden we're creating a scorecard and somebody says, well, how about the other 8 divisions? And we say, well, they weren't interested. So, that's all we can do is create awareness and recognition, and that's what the standard lets us do.
Mm-hmm. We are unfortunately out of time. There was a couple other questions with regards to some different organizations that might be interested in, like the Government of Finance Officers Association, the Association of Government Accountants, the National Institute of Government Purchasing. Different organizations might be interested. I think there's some questions around, have these organizations been notified, and I mean, I would think that that's what we continue to do. We're continuing to reach out to organizations, certainly as we learn of them, and we will continue to do that. We want to work with others on this. I know we've already interfaced with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, for instance, and other organizations.
Yep.
So we're constantly looking for ways to reach out and kind of get the word out.
Yeah.
Any last closing remarks, Rich?
No, I just think I'm real proud to be part of our government, and I love working with all of you, because I know you're equally interested in building our government. And I think we all ought to say to each other, thank you for your service. We're getting back for the public some excellent value, and trying to improve that again for tomorrow. So I'm happy to be here and glad you joined us.
Well, thank you very much, Rich. It was a great presentation, and thanks everybody for joining. Have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are joining us from. And with that, have a great week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Have a great week, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.